Alright. Actually, let's... No, I don't want to put that up. But I do want to put this up, yes. Okay. So, I was unsatisfied with the last stream and even my webpage that I've done for 5-star Magicite because it's not descriptive enough. Just telling people what 5-star Magicite decks to use, it doesn't work because there's so many different ways that you can go about it, and they're all fine. They all make sense in their own way. So what I wanted to do here instead is kind of have an open discussion on how to go about doing it. And I've come up with 4 different, like, templates to use, and I want everyone's thoughts on what they think is the best. And eventually, it'll just, you know, people's arguments for what is and isn't the best will allow them to choose which one is the best. And allow me to choose too. Because I'm still undecided, to be honest. And those different configs are... I'm going to use the first 5-star Magicite as our base. That's not big enough. There we go. Is that big enough? Can people see that? Now that's big enough. So, actually... This is... the first of 4 that I've got prepared. Just to give you a general idea of what I'm talking about here. There's different ways to construct things, and each of them has their own like advantages and disadvantages. So I call this one the generic 2-2. Why I call it that is because this is the same group of 4. Every and Medina are always flex, like, so you will use whatever is good for the team. But as far as the 2 Quetzalcoatl's and the 2 Behemoth Kings, all 4 of those would be the same. Doesn't matter if you use physical or magical team. So that's why I call it generic, and I call it 2-2 because 2 empower Magicite and 2 dampen. A different template would be the 2-1, which is 2 Behemoth Kings, 2 empower, 1 dampen, and 2 Evray Medines. So it would be 2 empower, 1 dampen. Then, if you can guess what the next one would be, that would be the generic 1-2, which again just swaps out for 1 empower Magicite and 2 dampen with 2 flex Evrays or Medines. And then lastly is the more complicated one. These 3 are pretty much self-explanatory in how they work. The last one is why empower 12 and not 15? I'm glad you asked. Because of the way passives are calculated. Passives are their total property is added together and then rounded up or down. So empower is limited to level 15, right? So at max level, you got 15. So what you would want to do from here is almost always, if you're using a second passive, especially in this case, is use another max level. So we'd have another max level, which would be 15, but it's actually a 7.5. So it's halved. I'll do that. With 100%, 50%, 5%, 12.5%. 6.25%. No, that is 12.5. Okay, so what happens here? Let me just get rid of that one. No one uses 5 passives. Is the way passives work is every time you stack one, it loses effectiveness. So the first one you use will be max effectiveness. Next one, half effectiveness. Next one, 25%, and another one, 12.5%. Or half, fourth, eighth, then 16th. So what you're trying to do here is cheat it. You're trying to cheat the game by using the way that it's all added together to round up in your favor. So if you use an Empower level 15 plus an Empower level 15, that gives you 15 plus 7.5. 22.5. Round that up, 23% increased damage. So what happens if you add on another Empower 15? That would be 15 plus 7.5. No. And then lastly it would be 3.75. That would equal 26.25. But say you use an Empower 12 as your third instead. 15. 7.5. Plus what's Empower 12? 25% of Empower 12 is 3. That equals... Wait a second. 7... Yeah. So, round this up because it's 0.5, and you get 26% increased damage. Round this down because it's 0.25, 26% increased damage. Using a 15 as your third Empower is indistinguishable from using a 12 because they end up in the same exact place. Does anyone not understand what I just did? I understand if you don't. I don't think I really described it properly. So what I'm trying to say here is that kind of exploiting the fact that the game rounds up for you means that having a 0.5 is the most desired outcome. Because that goes up, while you have 0.75 more on this total. But it's actually the same thing. And what's the difference there? I think everybody by now knows the horrors of Magicite leveling, right? And how Magicites take so much more experience every time that they're leveled to an extra like point or whatever. Terrible. Lon uses it, so it's bad. So Empower, we'll say the key points are 99, 80, 65, and 50. Why use a level 15 when that is the exact same as a level 12 that you get at level 80? everybody knows how difficult and how many arcana, a million arcana it takes to level a Magicite from 80 to 99. It is so much easier to go to 80, and that's actually the point of what I'm trying to push across here, is that there's going to be a few cases where you're using passives, where you're using too high of a passive and you leveled it too much. That's something I plan on answering by the end of all of this, Circo. I'm not sure what you mean, Ryan. What do you mean, both? It does not round before the end, if that's what you're saying. Like, 7.5 doesn't get rounded to 8, and 3.75 doesn't get rounded to 4, which would make this 27%. It waits until this before it rounds. Now, this is actually not bad. 23% is fine. If you want to use 2 empowers, cool. Oh, so you're saying that, let's go see. Because I know I have a link on this page, which I should link right now in case anyone wants to follow along. And now this doesn't actually say, because it only gives us a 0.5. And this is where I got the information from. Seeing that the 0.5 is rounded up. I don't know. It's there. Where is it? Oh. Man, that's even worse. That's so abusable. Like, so this would be ideal. 315s would be ideal because you get a 27%. Though, I guess, I mean, is it worth leveling another Magicite from 80 to 99 just for an extra 1%? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Arguably not worth, but it is important to know. Because a lot of people have level 99 4-star Magicite, and they may inherit those 4-star Magicite for their secondary passives. Like, say you got a Garuda, and you want to inherit, Fast Act level 8 onto something. And they mistakenly believed that they could have just used a level 80 Garuda to get an Empower 12 instead. But it's actually... It actually does make sense to inherit over that level 15 if you've got it. If you don't have it already, then go with 12. Actually, you could probably go down further, couldn't you? So, obviously, we want the 15 plus the 7.5. So how do we get a 25.25? Or lower? In order to exploit the round up into a 26. Uh, 10 would be a 2.5. That wouldn't work. So yeah, you'd want to go 12. Because 10 would be a 2.5, which would mean it would... be even, so it wouldn't round up. So you'd want a level 80. So 15, 15, 12. 15, 15, 15 if you want. If you've got the passives already leveled, but 15, 15, 12 if you don't. Good to know. Good to know I was wrong there, because that's beneficial. So I'll amend what's on screen. This would be 27% and this would be 26%. The prior example would have been 2.5 for 25. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, the reason why I have that stuff like that, is because I wanted to point out the differences between these, like what kind of properties you've got for available passives on each of these templates. On the generic 2 out of 2, you have a total of 7. I call them generic passives. That means that they would be passives that would be shared by a physical and magical team. I do not like this at all, because it means you're basically wasting slots. Since you would be using all 4 of these Magicite for both physical and magical, if I wanted to carry any deadly strikes on either of these, it would be wasted on a magical team. So I would have to use a different Behemoth King, which means yet another Magicite leveled up. So that would be a total of 4 Magicite if I wanted to waste slots for a magical team, or 5 Magicite if I didn't. On the generic 2.1, it means we have another Medine or Evray, whatever. They both operate in the same way. To kind of, I call them the flex spots. So let's talk about this one for a second. In that you use these 3 Magicite for both physical and magical teams. So what you would do is you add a dampen onto your dampen Magicite to give you 2 dampens. Why I have 7 and 10 here is exactly the same reason we now have the 12 and 15 on here, is because dampens start out at level 10. So it would be 10 plus 5 for a total of 15% dampen. Or if you want to use a level 7 dampen, which is, I think you only need to level a Magicite up to level 65, which is heaven, right? That takes, you know, barely any time, like 1 Arcana. That gives you a level 7. So we have to 3.5 for 14%. Or 14.5. No, 13.5. 14%. So it's the exact same situation where you put so much less experience into the Magicite and you only get penalized 1%. For a lot of people, like a lot of people that weren't able to farm up their 4-star Magicite a lot and will just now be farming up their 5-star, it just makes... It doesn't make sense to level a Magicite up to level 99 for the max passive. Right, sanity versus an extra 1%. So that's why I have 7 or 10 listed here. Because I have a level 99 dampened Magicite for basically every element, that I actually placed a priority on that over the other stuff. I will probably be inheriting a level 10 into a level 10 5-star, but again, if you don't have that already, I wouldn't bother. But anyway, this is a generic passive, but basically mandatory. It's very, very beneficial to have the second dampen, just as it's beneficial to have a third empower. Yeah, I'm going to discuss Evrays and Medines. So these are generic, but they're awesome. So I would not suggest using anything else in those spots. So that gives us 4 generic passives. What are generic passives? You can inherit both passives. You can inherit as many passives as you want from a Magicite. It doesn't have to be limited to one. So what are generic passives? Passives that are good for both teams. The two that stand out most prominently would be Health Boon and Fast Act. Both Health Boon and Fast Act are awesome. I personally would love to have 2 for every single team. So they make great generic passives, but I would advise against going hard on these right now because things are going to change later when we get Medine. So I guess I'll talk about this for just a second. Let's say for a second these are Evrays. Evrays are... Empower Holy, Attack Boon, and Surging Power. What you're using Evrays and Medines for is the Surging Power. The Empower Holy, I mean, if we're assuming that this is a Lightning team, is useless, but that's okay. Surging Power is powerful enough to make up for that fact. But Evrays have the drawback of only having Attack Boon on them. So things are going to change when these get changed into Medines, because Medines remove this Attack Boon and give you another inheritance slot instead, which makes them more flexible. So if we assume right now that these are Evrays, then that means this is 1 slot and 1 slot, because this is Surging Power, an Attack Boon, Surging Power, and Attack Boon. Two boons is, or 2 Attack Boons or 2 Magic Boons is great for the team. You shouldn't need any more than that. And you got 1 inheritance slot. These can be, you know, specialized. And that's kind of the point of all of this, is that you're using 6 generic slots here that can be used for both physical and magical. And then you've got, you know, 3 or 4 Evrays or Medines to help you customize the team. Like, this is something I would not want on my magical team, so this Deadly Strikes that I get from, you know, let's say Belias is, this month we're going to be getting 5-star Fire Magicite, and they're going to be Deadly Strikes and Health Boon. Belias grants a level 10 Deadly Strikes, which goes great with the fact that you already have 2 Precise Strikes on the team. And then you've got another specialized slot, and you can make this you know, something that goes with defensively. This one's kind of weird. Because I think I'm actually going to say Precise Strikes. And you'll see why. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. I'm not going to plan for now, I'm going to plan for later. And you'll see why in a second. Yes, having 3 Precise Strikes on a team is not ideal. That grants you a level 10, or 10%, 5%, and then 2.5 for an extra 3%. That's 18% crit rate. This is not that useful. It's a 3% for, you know, a total expected damage increase of 1.5%. Not that much. But it's a prep for the future. Because that's if these were Evrays. What if these were Medines? Medines have... You see Evray here? Medines have the same thing with Empower Holy. Surging Power level 15, which is just disgusting. And 2 Inheritance slots instead. So if it's got 2 Inheritance slots, it makes it more flexible, but less flexible at the same time. Because both passives need to be accounted for. You can't just swap in one. You know, like if you're using 2 Evrays, you got 2 slots. Or 1 on each, so you can mix and match however you want. But if you've got Medines, then 2 slots are taken up, so you can't mix and match as well, even though you got more room to add passives. So what I would do with Medines instead, which would be to have 1 Medine with Attack Boon and Attack Boon, and then 1 Medine with Magic Boon and Magic Boon. Because you are guaranteed to want those 2 passives on your teams. We're going to be getting a Magicite later. I believe it's Typhon and Sildra, who give us level 20 attack boons and magic boons, giving us a level, a 30% boon for if you've got 2 of these. Doesn't make that much sense to use a third because that's only 5% more. So, if these are Medines, you've got 2 attack boons for a physical team, 2 magic boons for a magical team. And then you've got another Medine to add here, which would be Deadly Strikes is a really good one, in my opinion, because it is strictly for a physical team, as well as Precise Strikes. That makes a good thing to add to a physical team. It will not be as powerful on the lightning team because you've already got 2 Precise Strikes. It will not be as powerful on a fire team because you've already got Deadly Strikes. Now, what would you use on a magic team for their specialized passives? Because they don't have any. I don't know. And this is where the 2-1 and the 1-2 templates run into a little bit of a problem, is that they don't have anything that makes you really want to bring something to a magical team. So instead of going offensive with Deadly Strikes, Precise Strikes, or Fast Act, it would be defensive instead. And that's okay. That's actually okay. In which case, what's the best thing that you could possibly do? And I guess that's look at the fight that they're being used in. In this case, what is the magical fight for water that you would be using this lightning team for? It would be Geos Gyno. And a handy thing that you can do here, just search for magic. And search for physical. There's a lot of magic damage in the Famfrit fight. But we want Geosky now. And we see here, there is actually a fair amount of magic stuff. What about physical? Less physical, but Regurgitate is a piercing physical damage, or piercing physical attack. And those would be... It would be more important to defend against those with your Magicite if you have to. It is kind of a weird. We also have the piercing magical dark damage attacks. The single target like attacks on slots 1 and 5 in the fight. It's weird. Water Magicite don't gravitate that much. Well, Famfrit is definitely more magical than physical damage. Look at Famfrit. Barely any physical attacks, and none of them are piercing. So we don't care. And that's important to know that your physical team doesn't need Blade Ward. Well, Blade Ward would be nice to have, but it needs Spell Ward a hell of a lot more than Blade Ward. And that's kind of important for figuring out generic stuff. Because we know both fights have a lot of magic damage. So one thing I know we want to have, without a doubt, is Spell Ward. Another generic that I know we want to have, without a doubt, would be Health Pool. It's got 2 more generic slots to fill. What would be good for both teams? You could say Fast Act. Because for the 2-1, you only have 1 Fast Act while you have 2 Precise Strikes. And I want that on both teams. I want 2 Fast Acts on every team, if I can get it. And I guess you could say, since the magical team is the only one that runs into issues, or not issues, but runs into more physical damage, you could go Blade Ward plus Defense Boon. Another Spell Ward. I think I would rather use a Resistance Boon over a second Spell Ward. Because remember, Resistance and Defense Boon, their benefits are added before piercing. So piercing attacks disregard your buffs. So you cast Tyro's USB 3. It grants everyone plus 200% defense and resistance in a fight. Piercing attacks ignore that because that's a buff. But Defense Boon and Resistance Boon, as I understand it, are respected by piercing attacks. So I think I'd probably rather a Defense Boon, a first occurrence of a Defense Boon, or a Resistance Boon instead of a second Spell Ward. Even though a second Spell Ward would still be good. Because what are we getting here? Nice, calm Chrono Cross music. Perfect. So our level 5, or our 5-star Magicite passives. And these are farmable right now. The Water Magicites are the Blade Ward and Spell Ward. Give us 8s. So we'd get a 4% Spell Ward if we had a second one. Where if you've got a Resistance Boon, which we'll get from Earth Magicite, I think. Yeah. would be a 20% boon for defense or resistance, I would take that. Or for now, we only have 4-star. For a while, it's going to be a while before we get Earth Magicite, so we are going to be stuck with 4-star tier. And what's 4-star tier? 15s. Still pretty good. I'd rather throw away a resistance boon, and you know, an advantage of that as well is that if you can see this, I'm not sure if you can. I don't know if it's large enough on Enliers. Resistance and defense boon max out when a Magicite is level 80 instead of 99. Or Blade Warden resistance boon, you would have to be level 99. So it's a less burden for leveling up Magicite as well. I just think it's really, really beneficial if you want to continue to stack magical defense to go with one resistance boon instead of a second spell ward, and vice versa with Blade Warden defense boon. So let's say fast act here and resistance boon here. It's so big that it's on the second line. Does anyone have any questions on what we did here? I'm going to start talking about the different templates now, but I wanted to get the first one done and fill it out just to show what I meant by generic and like the flexibility, the flex positions that Evrays and Medines bring. And this would be with Medines. Evrays would be different. If we're using Evrays, then 2 magic boons for a mage team, or precise strikes and deadly strikes for a physical team, because physical teams get the added benefit of their Evrays already carrying attack boons. And that's the difference here. And why I would go with Precise Strikes and Deadly Strikes, because I don't want to level up more than 4 Evrays. I guess you could go 5 if you wanted to make a flex spot for situations like this, where you don't want a third Precise Strikes. I mean, what do you add instead? Health boon? Yeah, I already went over why there's 3 instances of Precise Strikes. And the reason would be because I'm going to have a Precise Strikes Evray with this template. So why not use it? I don't want to level up 5. If I don't want to level up 5 Evrays, and I've got 2 magic boons, and then 2 for physical teams, it would make sense to level up 5. Or just skip Deadly Strikes, because it's not as important. But the reason why I would do this the way it is now is because there's nothing that I want off of Everay, except for what is inherited onto them right now, for later when Medine comes out. So what I would do is, if I have a Precise Strikes Evray and a Deadly Strikes Evray, I would just take one Medine and inherit both of them onto it. So there wouldn't be any wastes in passives. From the way this kind of played out, this could go health boon instead. But I think what I'd rather do No, that's not true. Let's get my 2 health boons in the generic. Oh, no, 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 no. No, maybe that's right. Well, anyway. That's nitpicking, and I think that's a problem with thinking about things like this is, all of this is really nitpicky once you get past the template itself. Because inheritances are hard to do anyway, because they take so much experience. Like, when do you have a fully complete team? I had a single complete team for 4-star, and that was the Earth, because I had, like, 3 months to prepare for 5-star Magicite, and I knew I wanted to prepare that one team. It's going to be very hard, in my opinion, to make a complete, fully inherited team for all of these elements. So I think it's more important to focus on your Evrays and Medines, because you can carry those across teams, so they're more important. They're more useful to inherit to, while these are, whatever. Besides these, which in my opinion are the most important, are getting your empowers and your dampens squared away, and everything else is just whenever you can get to it. So that's the general idea behind the 2-1 or the 1-2 template. The 1-2 template is a little different, and in my opinion, I think it's actually better. Because the only thing that's different about it, if you're taking a look here. Why is this generic and generic? Oh, right, because it's not flex. So what do we have? We have 2 dampens because we have 2 quets. We have 3 empowers, just like we have up here. 3 empowers and 2 dampens. Well, what is the difference between these 2 teams? It's that we have 1 precise strikes on the team and 2 fast acts. That's the only difference. 2 precise strikes, 1 fast act. Also, you're guaranteed to have 2 level 10 dampens, so you don't have to worry about this. But this stays the same. And in my opinion, this is better, because fast act is generic, is useful for both physical and magical. So I would rather have 2 fast acts on the team than 2 precise strikes. Why have 2 Behemoth Kings on a magical team? It doesn't make any sense. Because both of these are useless passives on a magical team. So I'd rather run with this. Still 4 generic slots, just like you've got here. Generic, generic, generic. See, that's a good point. And that would be... I was going to get to that. That's the difference between these teams, is that this is more offensive. Well, this is more defensive, because torments exist. Magicites aren't the only fights. Other hard fights in the game exist. And torments deal... or a lot of fights deal more than one type of damage, right? So say you're not using a Magicite team, or you're not going against a Magicite, you're going against a fight that does, you know, holy and ice damage. You would take a different team in, and that would be, what is it, holy and ice? So you would want to use Dampen Light, Death Gaze, and where's Dampen Ice? Oh, Dampen Blizzard, of course. It's Empower Ice, but Dampen Blizzard. Thanks, DNA. And you would take Phoenix. So Death Gaze. And if you're using the 1-2 template, that means that you have a Dampen Magicite, which has 2 generic passives on it. This is what Rydia's just brought up in chat. Well, if you're using the 1-2 template, then you have a single strong Dampen Magicite, which has Dampen inherited onto it. So it already has the 14 or the 15% on it. Where if you were using the 1-2 template, then it's not as strong as far as a single element dampen goes. Anyone understand that? But there's a flip side, and I definitely had this conversation on my Discord, is that Torments aren't just dealing more than 1 damage type at you, you're also dealing more than 1 damage type at the boss. You would like to line up all of your like elemental damage, say Final Fantasy VIII. You know, you got Renoa, you got Laguna, you got Squall, you're all doing ice damage, and it makes sense. To run with a 2-1, because then you can bring, you know, 2 Empower Ice, and then you can use your other 3 slots to customize how you're, you know, dampening. But what if you're Final Fantasy 12 and you've got 2 different damage types? You got Ash dealing lightning damage, and let's see, who else is strong in the Vayne. You got Vayne dealing dark damage. Both of them are really good characters. You know, that's what you got to work with. And in that case, this would be better, the 1-2, because then you would be able to bring Behemoth King for Ash for, you know, 3 empowers for, you know, with the total of 26 or 27% or whatever. And then you could bring Arc, who would also be inherited the same way for another 27%, and then have 3 slots left over. Which means that, you know, you would only be getting a 10%. So, like, yeah, it's awful. It is awful. That's why I'm still talking about this, even though we're at 5-star Magicite, you know, 1 year later after 3-star release. It's frigging awful. And that's why I want to try and simplify it. And if you want to simplify it, I would just say choose 1-2 or 2-1. And then just make every team that exact way. I don't like the 2-2 at all, because it locks you in too hard. Everything's too spread out. Like the things that we just talked about, like having a good stacked Dampen Magicite or a good stacked Empower Magicite, the 2-2 suffers from having neither. So you're basically locked into... Just not only do you have to make more Magicite, because you're using less Evrays and Medines, but you're also weaker in stuff like Torments. I hate this one. I hate it. Where this is what I just brought up. It's a matter of preference, I think. Do you want stronger Empower Magicite? Or do you want stronger Dampen Magicite? That's my simplification for you. I think personally, I'd probably take stronger Empower Magicite. I like to plan offensively rather than defensively. And shit, if worse comes to worse, there's nothing wrong with leveling a Magicite to level 65 and getting a 7% and inheriting it onto something temporarily. Screw it. It's simple and cheap and easy. Where it would be harder to level up an Empower because they need to be leveled higher. Because a level 12 takes a level 80 Magicite, while a level 7 takes a level 65. There is a template that I did not list here because it's extreme. Why not get the best of both worlds? I'll show it to you right now. The generic 1-1. This is what I have currently listed on my website, and I don't agree with it. That's why I wanted to do this stream, because I wanted to have a discussion so I had something to base what I'm getting rid of that with. So this gives you the best of both worlds when it comes to your Empower and your Dampen Magicite. And basically makes the team more specialized. Oops. It's so specialized that it's kind of counterproductive. You probably want to make a generic Medine that you would use on both teams. Let's make the ultimate generic Magicite with Boon and Fast Act. So in this case, you get 3 slots to work with. So this is really, really simple. The problem with this is that it's kind of not that beneficial to use 3 Medines, because you're already sacrificing 1 slot to Empower Holy, which only does something for a Holy team. So you're really banking on that Surging Power being effective. So you got a level 15 Surging Power. It's just like Empower. So 15, 7.5. And that's the sweet spot. And that's why having 2 Medines is really good. But if you add 1 more, what does that give you? A 20%, 27% Surging Power versus 23%. God. Doesn't sound that bad, does it? This is the most simple way to build Magicite. Because this is the same Magicite for every single team that you make. Inherit Empower, and you're done. One of these passives is the same for every single team that you make. Inherit a Dampen onto the Dampen, and then you got 1 slot for generic. Which makes it really simple. What is the highest priority generic? We looked at the water Magicites, Fanfrit and Geoskyno, and we saw that the boss does a lot of magic damage. Both of the bosses do a lot of magic damage. Spell Ward. You got a health boon and fast stack because I want that on every single team. You got 2 attack boons or 2 magic boons because I want that on every single team. So the only thing you have to think about is 3 passive slots. Where replacing 1 Medine with a Death Gaze be a good idea. I've heard conflicting information about that. So the way Medine works is, I believe it's a linear scaling. Is there anybody in chat that can talk to me about this right now? let's use Evray because it's a hell of a lot easier since it's a 10%. So Evray has Surging Power, level 10. What Surging Power is for as much health that you have, you deal more damage. So if you're at 100% health, deal 10% more damage. If you're at 10% health, deal 1% more damage. Since all teams except for Edge Super Soul Break 2 or Raijin Super Soul Break, teams basically they're built upon having more health than you don't have health. You thought it was based on 10k health. So it's not, that would actually, let's see if it's listed here. This is a really old post. And I don't think Surging Power existed back in 3-star. So I'm not sure if it's listed. Do you have a page, like some kind of citation? Because I would like to personally read it. I would like to get Surging Power correct. Okay, added damage push and Surging Power. Let's search for it. Okay. Increases a character's damage dealt as their current flat HP gets higher. Up to a X% damage boost at 10,000. Okay. That adds extra value to using health boons. So, 2 health boons. Make it happen. Okay, so well, that's the way it works. Okay. So, with Every with a Surging Power level 10, at 10,000 health, you're dealing 10% more damage. At 1,000 health, you're dealing 1% more damage. And I know the way Hand of Vengeance works is not different. This is a linear scale, where Hand of Vengeance is messed up, is not as good. Like, having 10% health, you know, or having, like, low health isn't as good as having more health with Surging Power. Increases a character's damage dealt as their HP% gets lower, up to an X% damage boost at near 0 HP. Specifically, it increases damage dealt by this equation, percent, where HP% is the current HP divided by max HP. I'm under the impression that Hand of Vengeance is not that beneficial. So having a third Medine isn't that beneficial, and so is having a 1 Hand of Vengeance not beneficial. But the thing about that is that this is such an easy to use template. And it may be worth using a single or a third Medine for 3% extra Surging Power just to make this process easier. Level 10, Death Gaze gives a 15. 8% boost to 20% health. That doesn't sound that bad. Because if I'm running 1 Death Gaze, that gives me a 15 instead, so that would mean 12% boosts at 20% health instead, and half that. So it would be a 6% boost at 40% health. Where if you're at about that health for a third Medine, what kind of damage boost you're looking at? Not that big. And it reduces variance too, I would say. Because, I mean, there's a lot of teams that use these Evrays, and mine included, that, oh shit, I was using Stone Press and I couldn't break the damage cap because at this point in the fight, I'm having trouble having this person have a decent amount of health. This is such a weird... I kind of want to do it, just because. I know all of these, like, when you get down to brass tacks, the benefits of these three, templates is not that different. And that's probably where I was going with the previous stuff that I have listed on my site, in trying to make a single stacked Empower and a single stacked Dampen for the eventual use of 2 Medines and death gazes, or 2 Medines and a death gaze or 3 Medines, is because, God, this is so much easier to use. But anyway, the point of the stream wasn't to tell people which one to use, it was to show people the options. Does anyone not understand what I'm trying to get at and why the 1-1 is... what the advantages of the 1-1, or the 2-1, or the 1-2 are? Does anyone not get that? Does anyone need anything explained to them before I move on to the complex one? Because I saw a lot of people mostly parroting stuff other people said, not approve of this kind of Magicite at all, which I personally don't understand. Putting 2 Empowers on an Empower Magicite. I just want to make sure people understand where we're going with that. As far as I know, there is no reason not to do this unless you're running 4 Empowers. You don't want to do that. You can use 4 Empowers, but I would only suggest doing that if you plan on doing the 1-1 when we get access to Medines. Because it definitely doesn't make sense to use 3 Evrays, so you kind of have an empty slot. And there's nothing wrong with using a 4th Empower if you have to here. But later on, when it does make sense to, use a 3rd Flexor, you would get rid of that Empower, and then you're left with 3. Alright, well, those are the 3 simplified ones because you would use the same generic stuff across 2. And I'm going to give people anxiety on the next round because... we got the specialized flex, which means you run 2 different teams for each type. If you've noticed, I talked about how there's precise strikes and fast act on Behemoth King and Quetz. Actually, I'm gonna... It does make sense to use 2 precise strikes on a physical team. So what would you do if you want to use those 2 precise strikes on a physical team, but use the 2 fast attacks on the magical? Well, you swap one out. So the Evrays and Medines stay constant. You don't have to think about those. But what we have here is one Behemoth King, which stays constant, and 1 Quetz that stays constant. You'll see, just look at them in power. We'll amend this because of what we found out earlier. These are constant, but there's a flex spot, and that's a Behemoth King that's specifically only for a physical team, and a Quetz that is specifically for a magical team. And it's what's weird about this and why I don't like it. I was thinking about using it because I was willing to put in the thought and the effort, but it may just be too much for me to handle. Is you inherit and empower onto a Quetz and a dampen onto Behemoth, so they equalize. So this team has 3 empowers, this team has 2 dampens, this team has 3 empowers, here, and this team has 2 dampens, the 2 Quetzalcoatls. And then you're left with 3 generic slots, like the flex, or the specialized slot on the flex character, because you would only use this on a physical team. Why not make this inheritance only good for a physical fight? And you're only going to use this Magicite on a magical team. Why not use this only for just the magical fight? So this would probably be, what, Blade Ward? Because that's the only... For Water Magicites, it's the only one you're worried about physical damage. Where here you'll use Deadly Strikes. And then you've got 3 generic slots that you would use the same shit for both teams. I love 2 health boons and I love 2 fast stacks. So what do we get? Health boon here. I'd probably save health boon for the Medine. So we know Spell Ward is good for both teams for water. And since we have 2 empty slots here, what I'd probably do, and see, I think a benefit of this is that since you're using this slot and this slot to be physical or magical focused, you can actually just use the same shit for your Medine on each team. Yeah, you're going to have 3 fast stacks on the magical team, but you're not always going to have 2 fast stacks. So for this last generic slot, I don't know, Resistance Boon? This is, it's not as bad as it looks, but it's still pretty bad. I mean, if you think about it, the Medines are dead simple on this one. You're running fast act, health boon, and 2 magic boons or 2 attack boons. So that's two Magicite just taken care of right there. You know you're inheriting in power. You know you're inheriting dampen. So you only got 4 slots to really think about. It's not that bad. It does require a lot of leveling up though, and that's why I don't like it. Because you are making 2 Behemoth Kings and 2 Quetzalcoatls. And fully inheriting. They require more inheritance to make work. And I think that's the problem, is that like the 2-1 and the 1-2 don't. But these are actually really powerful because you're because the extra effort is rewarded, since you're gonna have more suited teams to what you're doing. You're not inheriting both dampens. The slash is to indicate either or. This would be either dampen 7 or dampen 10. Remember, because dampen 7 is a 3.5 for 4%, and dampen 10 is 5 for 5%. Depending on which sanity versus, you know, effectiveness. And the same here, because it's only an extra 1% if you move up from 12 to 15. I think this might be easier to use. If we assume that Empower 15s are a boost, you could change this. No, never mind. We'll keep it that way. And that's everything that I can think of. I can't think of any other different ways you could build these. So you got 2-2. Does everyone understand the differences between these? If no one understands, speak up. Or if someone doesn't understand, please speak up. It's okay if you don't. I have sincere doubts over my effectiveness in actually explaining all this crap. And does anyone have a personal preference? What is there any version that they think is better for them, and why? I'm honestly thinking about using this just to be an obstinate ass. No, I'm calling these flex, because it's easier to type. Is it because mages generally don't have more health? Because of the way the surging power scales? I guess I look at that in being, if you're using 2/2 on a mage team, you're obviously hindering your physical team. As well as hindering your mage team by having one more useless passive here than you needed otherwise. Not that Evray doesn't, or Medine doesn't grant a useless passive themselves in Empower Holy. I guess my issue with the 2/2 is this is a lot of stuff to fill up. So and this is probably the logical solution for your 2 dampened Magicite, right? I want 2 health boons and I want 2 fast stacks. This team has 2 fast stacks. It does protect you better. It's probably my preference for more offensive focused teams. That I'd rather the second or the third Medine. Or Evray. Second Evray. Well, I suppose if you're only running one Evray, you would want a magic boon. And just count that as a loss for a physical team. Oh, but then you don't have 2 attack boons. I'm so used to using 2 Evrays. So defense boon, not that important. But once Medine came out, that would make things easier, because you would use 2 attack boons or 2 magic boons. And then you could make this stuff whatever you wanted. Evray can. Sure, yeah. Yeah. So you would have an attack boon Evray and a magic boon Evray, so you would only need to add 1 magic boon. Does that make sense for how you would run a 2/2? Yeah, it's not often in these other configurations that you're able to run so far down the defensive tree that you make it to having both a defense boon and resistance boon. So it is nice to have that. So just because I don't personally like the 2/2 template doesn't mean it's a bad one. I just really like having 2 Evrays. For both physical and magical. Anybody else? It was good. It was good. That was a good talk about 2/2. No deadly strikes. Not that that's that much of a loss. Deadly strikes is not that great of a passive. I'll take a second precise strikes over it. Unless it's like the Wind team or something, or Holy team, where you've got people where you know you've got 100% crit rate. Like Cloud and Orlando. Right. Ignis BSB grants 100% crit rate. I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to use 1-1. And use a Tomb of Dean Death Case. It just sounds fun. Maybe it's not the best. It does provide me with that double dampen and triple empower Magicites, the coveted. Which I personally think are really nice to have for Torments and other stuff. Oh, this is kind of cheating. You just build for wind. Because the Medines add Empower Holy to Beatrix. That's why Holy characters are so good for Torments, because your Evrays and Medines are actually granting that useless passive for everybody else to them. So let's try to think up another one. Final Fantasy 2? Varian, Joseph and Maria. So are you using a Manticore? For Varian and Joseph ice damage, and Adamantoise for Maria earth damage. Then you got 3 slots. I don't know. Let's see what kind of damage the Final Fantasy 2 Torment does. Oh my. 3 different types. Well, more than that. Fire, ice, lightning, and bio. Bio obviously can't dampen bio. So you wear bio resistance, and then use your other 3 slots to defend against, I don't know. I'll probably carry 1 Medine, and then defend against 2 of these elements. Man, what a mess. Piercing bio, definitely bio resist. So you start out with ice, and then your next is fire. Oh, of course, in the last phase it's... well, it's not even the last phase. You have another phase? Earth, then lightning. Ice. So I'd say ice is the most important. Ice. What's the ice dampen? Is that Phoenix? Yeah. I love Phoenix. Phoenix is a health boon. Phoenix and Quetzalcoatl. Their health boon and fast act. Great Magicite. It looks like you probably get away with that. Fire probably next. Famfrit. And we know that I'm doing this for me and what my Magicites would look like for this fight. So that would be dampen 7. Dampen 7. I wonder if I just get rid of Famfrit and use 2 Medines. 1 attack boon and 1 magic boon. Because they're pretty potent. It looks like Phoenix is the real necessary dampen here. Whatever is second passive on Phoenix. What would I put as my second passive on Phoenix? Mateus and Manicore. Well, Mateus uses a lot of magic damage. Manicore, not so much. Piercing, 390%, eh. Really, not that powerful. This is problematic. Alright, what about physical? Mateus does not use a lot of physical damage. Holy shit. Yeah. Manicore, on the other hand. So these are very polarized Magicites. But it looks like it makes more sense to defend against magical than it does physical. Because Mateus really just doesn't do physical damage. 2 instances, area of effect, not even piercing. Whatever. Could use Fast Act. So if I had a Belias, Phoenix, Medine. Sorry for real-time theory crafting. Death Gaze. I just want to see how, like, if I made a choice to stick with a pattern, a template, I would want to see how it plays out later on, and not just for the stuff that we're looking at the moment, and see if it makes sense. Fast Act makes sense here. If I assume that every single team is going to have a Medine with Fast Act and Health Boon on it, I can build around that. So what the Death Gaze can do can be a flex. So these are concrete. But okay, we're going against Mateus. Or we're going against Manicore. Oh wait, yeah. Oh, that makes sense to me. Death Gaze may not be the most effective Magicite, but I think it'll be fun. Screw it.